Welcome to the LifeBeat podcast, a One Joshua Group production, providing access to information and experts to improve quality of life and health outcomes.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Kermit Payne, host for LifeBeat, a podcast series produced by the One Joshua Group. We thank you so very much for joining us and participating in these learning activities to help us improve life and health outcomes. LifeBeat, a podcast series. Joining us today is Dr. Sean Kimbro, and Dr. Kimbro is professor at Morehouse School of Medicine. Prior to coming to Morehouse School of Medicine, Dr. Kimbro was involved in research activities at Clark Atlanta University, Emory University Winship Center, and the North Carolina Central University.
Yes.
Dr. Kimbro, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So in our earlier conversations, you told me that you were inspired in high school to become involved in research. What on earth were you doing in high school to make you just want to know more about test tubes and proteins?
You know, I have to say that my love for puzzles is this idea that you can put something together and get this end product out. And it just fostered into my mother, who got me in every summer program that was possible. And it's actually started at 16 when I did my first or the only, what do you call that, science fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the science fair and got this bunch of awards. I was like, what is this about? And then someone approached me from Wright State University and said, I want you to come on out and work in my lab. And I remember at 16 driving out to Wright State University. I had a 67 green Mustang and driving out there and this thing making noise. And we were out there and he said, here's the key. And I said, I got a key to a laboratory at 16. And I think that was so inspirational for me. And from then on, I just leveraged that event and got some more awards, presented a couple of more places, and then ended up going to leveraging that to Washington University in St. Louis. And I actually leveraged the fact that, listen, I've gotten these awards, and from there, published and did research in the lab at WashU, and really pushed me into this area of doing bench research, and that's where I kind of got my love for doing it. My mother was a physical therapist, and that also gave some inspiration there. But I've had a lot of folks who actually took an interest, and also just said, give it a try, do it. And so that I leveraged that a lot. I mean, it's nothing like seeing at 20 years old, 21 years old, seeing your name published. And you realize that it's black and white on this paper, and no one knows what color you are. And especially at that time, because we didn't have the internet, so you couldn't look me up, right? But that was very powerful. Yeah.
So what did you think you were doing when you were 16, 18, 20, and 11? What did you think you were doing?
I have also considered science an art. So I'm an art minor. And I worked in the pathology lab. So that first lab experience was in the pathology lab. And I was charged with actually making the slides for the medical students. And so you had to sit up there and you had different colors of dyes and everything. So it was artsy for me. I loved it. I said, oh, this is great. So my idea was, wow, this is not only a puzzle, but there's a certain artistry associated with it. So at the time, I didn't have any questions I was trying to solve. I didn't have any idea or quest to find a solution for anything, to be honest with you. I enjoyed the act, the process at that point. So I didn't really understand. I wasn't really hardcore introduced into the research part, into asking the question until grad school. Yeah.
So you were playing with puzzles. You learned how to make things fit and work.
Right.
You saw the result of the work that you were doing. You saw it was beneficial. Yeah. And then you landed an NIH R01 level grant.
Right.
It was in black and white too. Did you jump up and down, or what did you do when you got your award letter?
So that particular award is even more special than just the regular R01, and that's what kind of made it so unique. The transformative R01 is a rare R01
Mm-hmm.
where when you submit the grant, they don't know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're getting judged based off an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you had a group of folks that said it was a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second stage of the process, they actually come in and they say, oh, now we're going to look at the science.
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize where the bias comes in. And that bias might be that I'm at a Black school,
Mm-hmm.
or the bias that I am African-American. And they say, ooh, maybe something else is wrong with it. But at the end of the day, we had a rebuttal to the comments. And Francis Collins, the director of NIH at the time, said, I love it, and signed off on it. And so we were the first group at a HBCU to receive that award. So that was really kind of neat. Didn't realize that until we got a phone call from NIH. Mm-hmm. But that was very powerful. So yes, I was floored because we wrote it, and I had a fantastic writer who worked with me, Susan, and we would sit down and I would just go back and forth. We were walking back and forth, just come up with this idea. Mm-hmm. And she got it on paper, and then we played with it and tweaked it. And then we sent it off. We said, okay, it's gone. Mm-hmm. We don't know. Okay, forget it. It was an opportunity that we didn't want to pass up. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, when we got the call, we need you to fill out the second part. We said, excuse me? Mm-hmm. And so that was great. So that was inspirational. And the topic is ancestral-driven drug discovery. Mm-hmm. So it kind of, the fact that they approved I thought might have been a little bit of a controversial topic, mm-hmm. was fantastic, exciting.
So, Dr. Kimbro, I think that 2 lessons that we learn is it has to be black and white, meaning it has to be written down. Mm-hmm. Right. We've got to document it. We've got to learn to document it with quality. And you've got to be willing to sign your name to it.
Right.
It's got to be something that you honor. So, and this was a transformative R01 grant. It was a unique grant. Right. And this was while you were at Morehouse School of Medicine, or?
It was when I was at North Carolina Central.
When you were at North Carolina Central.
And it followed me to Morehouse.
Mm-hmm. Help define the bench research that you do and its relationship to health disparities.
Okay. So we look at the disparities in terms of the biology of it. So I call it looking at the biology of health disparities. Mm-hmm. And we do that via looking at cell lines. And so Henrietta Lacks, the HeLa cells, is an example of a cell line that we take the cell line and then we bring that into the lab and we look at the biology that exists within that cell and how that might impact outcomes related to health. We published a paper in conjunction with Dr. Kittles looking at the genetic ancestry of some of those cell lines. And I think he might have mentioned that it was a big debate that these cell lines that were being used for prostate cancer, that they were, this is a Black guy and he has these horrible cancer cells. Come to find out, it wasn't from a Black guy at all. Mm-hmm. And that impact and the money that was spent on this lie, that at the end of the day, you weren't even looking at a Black guy. And yet you were making decisions about our health and where to go forward off of a cell line that wasn't correct. So we look at and use tissue culture and some bacterial work to kind of play with proteins and play with structures and to get at those subtle biological differences that might exist between where people are from, where they're living, and even what they might be experiencing in that environment.
So data science, and I want to ask another question when you mention experience, and next to talk about artificial intelligence and what we will gain from all of us. That's not a play on words or a reference to anything. It's just meaning all of us. Participating in creating what the AI body of knowledge will contribute. How important is it that all of us understand how important participating in AI is?
So I think our role in that spectrum of activities is going to be centered around participating in the data collection.
Mm-hmm.
You can only make decisions based off of the data that you're given.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the data that's given now is lacking
Mm-hmm.
people of color and that genetic diversity. And it's very Eurocentric right now. Science itself is very Eurocentric, to be honest with you. And so if you take it in that context, the inclusion or being involved in some of these studies, some of this data collection, helps us be considered when that AI starts playing around with all that data and spits out an answer, that you're part of that analysis. Where right now, if it was to spit it out, we're not included in that analysis. So it's that AI is going to spit out a biased response or a solution.
So communities are very well known for doing screenings and health fairs, and where the rubber meets the road for the need of these services that'll end up with people like you. How important is it that we participate in the data collection at that level, at the community level? And what are your suggestions about that?
So we have a project going on now called Discovery of Us. And the title came from someone in the community. And that is when we are actually collecting some of that data. And it's unique in the fact that we're not looking at the genetics, we're looking at inflammation or the impact of stress. We're even thinking about exploring sleep as well. And getting at all those questions, collecting that data from a large number of Black and brown people. And that type of participation is one solution to gathering that data. I think we do spend, and I was trained to, the data is either there already and you analyze it to death, but then you realize it's got holes in it and it's missing. So for the community to participate, we actually had somebody in the community state that, we're kind of tired of being probed and educated to and screened. We want to be part of something. And so we realized that and have leveraged that and our respect in the community. Morehouse School of Medicine coming to the table. We've gone down into rural areas, and one young man said he mentioned that he was working with Morehouse School of Medicine, and people's eyes popped up and they were like, oh my goodness, really? And they couldn't believe that he was working with us, even though we were 3 hours away. And so I think there's some opportunities here that are unique to HBCUs as well, to leverage that those relationships in such a way to fill in that gap of knowledge that's needed for AI and for future analysis.
It's interesting because we do know that victories are won in rural areas. And the fact that we participate in community engagement activities in not just urban, but in rural areas. Correct. And maybe the richness of this country is in rural areas, to find out where those discoveries are, because we have communities, rural areas, we have communities, families living together who've been generations living together. We don't get that same cohesiveness, I don't think, in urban areas, much more so in rural areas. Talk about community engagement and what you believe we can get from just being more involved in community areas, not necessarily in rural areas, but how can community engagement help improve health outcomes?
So I think understanding, better understanding what the disparity is and understanding all the parameters as a person in the community, it provides us opportunities to also impact policy. Because if you know why you're getting sick, and if it's due to the environment, then you can know what to go ask for. If you don't know that, then you just walk around and you're getting impacted by the environment. You don't know what to ask for. You also can appreciate behaviors, understand what behaviors cost or have an impact on your health. I think a lot of times, since we now have the ability to go online and pull up your phone and do the quick searches, some of the information that I'm encountering out in the community are not based off of facts. They're based off of rumor or someone said. Then you realize that a lot of things that are said have not been tested. They're just hypothesized. And I think people don't understand. So there's a level of education And the part of that piece in the discovery of us is to go back in the community and share with you in the community what we're doing, what we found, and understand that they participated in that finding.
So we had a question posed to us to ask you, and that was, what are some of the key health disparities that you believe need urgent attention? And how can research contribute to addressing these issues?
So I think the biggest one that was kind of I would almost argue is the centerpiece is obesity. If you tackle obesity has an impact on cancer risk, on diabetes risk, hypertension. So if you really go after that, you would probably put a big dent in some of the disparities that we see, the health disparities that we see. That also involves that now you got to change some behaviors. There's some biology to that obesity question, and there's some behaviors that need to be modified. Okay. And getting at that, you then would tackle some of the other pieces in terms of how do we prevent some cancers. Screening is one, diet is another, and exercise, etc. But you notice that all some things that you do with obesity, with weight management. So if you appreciate weight management and obesity, then you can move on and you'll probably address the other disparities by default. And then you got the biology associated with that. One thing that we're pushing for in my group is looking at creating precision interventions and precision nutrition. The idea that your genetics, your environment, your behavior, when you put them together, you maybe can come up with a formula that says that will work for one person, but it may not work for the other. And that type of precision is going to involve the community getting involved to participate in those types of interventions. It might mean that you give blood and DNA to get at that precision. Right now, the discovery of us, the samples are obtained using Morehouse School of Medicine's money. There you go. And also, they are stored at Morehouse. So the Black and brown people have the Black and brown folks' DNA.
Well, let's stay on that for a minute. Tell us more about Discovery of Us. This is, talk about that.
So Discovery of Us is a project that I was looking through some data and realized that we did not have data related to inflammatory markers, inflammation. And a lot of diseases out there are related to inflammation. So we don't have that data on inflammation, and the studies I was reading in the publications, talking about being in black and white, didn't have but a handful of Black and brown people in it. How are you going to make an assessment of inflammation if your patient comes in and they are African American, then their genetic ancestry implies that they have a high West African ancestry. If that person is different coming in the door because of their environment, their genetic ancestry, and then you have that European came in, do you treat them the same? And so we started to look at some of this. And so out of that came this idea. I came in wanting to actually look for those inflammatory markers and then look at them in context of obesity and diabetes. And so along with Dr. Leanne Burnham and Rick Kittles and Jabril Johnson at Morehouse, we've kind of created this nice team where we go out and we go in the community and get samples and talk to folks. And then we give them back some of their information, A1C, we give that PSA and so forth. And then we give back their genetic ancestry as well, give them percentages, not the deep dive, but just so they can understand where they kind of come from. And that's been a real positive draw. And we're looking at that in terms of stress. So we have graduate students. And so far, the students are looking at all Black and brown students, looking at that data and addressing or trying to discern the impact stress has on inflammation from a different perspective. And you look at it within a group, one group.
There's a lot to unpack, isn't it?
Yes.
I have a question. I was just trying to figure out, this is really about COVID, because I think sometimes we forget that COVID happened.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any lessons out of COVID that you guys have been able to employ in the research that you're doing?
So from my perspective, when COVID broke, and my lab was in North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina, and we did some work in a rural space called Halifax County. And we learned a lot about community engagement. And that was a crash course. We were some of the front lines in getting vaccines, and we would go out there, and my students would go out there as well. And I learned a couple things about the involvement of students in that community engaged research was very impactful for those students. It's something to be said when you see the person that you are kind of looking at in the laboratory, but you don't see that person. You see a sample, you see a test tube.
Right.
And so I wanted that connection to be made. And once they made that connection, phenomenal commitment from the students. And we also appreciated some of the workload, because it's not easy if you're going out, especially to rural spaces. That's why a lot of folks don't do rural space, because if you have to drive 2 hours to get out there, how many times do you go out? So right now we are building an infrastructure in Terrell County and in the city of Dawson.
That's here in Georgia.
In Georgia. Building relationships with that community and that whole county, and it has been phenomenal. And they have been just like, what do you need? And so we're starting somewhere small like that. It also has on the scale for the health here in North Carolina, it's on the bottom of all the counties. So yeah, that's why I was chosen. And it's right next to Albany, Georgia, and where they've had where we have some relationships already built. So. Yeah.
So joining us today is Dr. Sean Kimbro. Dr. Kimbro is professor of medicine at Morehouse School of Medicine by way of Clark Atlanta University, Emory University, and the North Carolina Central University. And Dr. Kimbro has shared with us the importance of community engagement, and we're going to go back there again because I believe it's critically important. When we look at 1.13 million people died from COVID, less than 100,000 of those people were under the age of 55. And imagine if we could employ those kind of communication, those kind of community engagement tactics, particularly as we begin to look at pandemic and epidemic preparedness going forward. And although your research is bench research, you have made it crystal clear to us that it's the same research, it impacts the same people, albeit clinical, be it bench. It is important that the community participates to be a part of that research and not to be invited to the table, to be invited to help build the table. So we thank you for that work. Now, you mentioned mentoring. So you've done a lot of mentoring, I can imagine.
Yes, I'm still doing it.
So what advice do you have for those aspiring researchers, especially those with underrepresented backgrounds who are looking to make a difference? And how do you recommend they go about finding a mentor?
I think the one thing that I noticed in the students in all the years that I've been in the professorship role, either assistant professor or full professor, the students that ask the questions get ahead further because they're not scared to ask. I've seen too many times when students don't ask. They assume or they think that they're going to be denied. I think so. That's one piece. Be willing to ask that question. Be willing to explore possibilities that, stay out of your comfort zone a little bit. You might realize that, or you don't like chemistry. I wasn't a great chemistry student. So I did kind of stay away from it, but I realized I had to deal with it and grasp it to some extent so I can move forward. If you like puzzles, if you like to ask that question, some of the best students that I've encountered are those students that like the question. when we're collecting data now, and there's some students that just keep going at the data, and I'm like, but wait a minute, back up for a minute, but they just run with it because they're just so excited because they see all this data available. So it's that excitement, the passion. So if you have a passion for asking that question, you love that puzzle, and if you want to make a difference, I always argue that there's two ways to make a difference. You make a difference in the clinic or in the lab. If I discover something in the lab, I could impact millions. And a physician won't necessarily impact millions of that caliber necessarily. So I think there's some value in this, and you don't have to also be in an environment where you can't be yourself. That's another. People like to say, "Oh, I don't want to be at the microscope all the time." It's not about being at the microscope anymore. Not like it used to be. You can be at the computer. If you have a wit about math, my goodness, art, right? Because pathology, to me, is an art. You know, and computer science and that deciphering all that data, that's a good math student. You know, and I think that's just this. So everything's now, biology is not just a biologist. And I think once we realize that, I think students can open up the doors a little bit and explore a little bit more. But I think ask. I remember a person said, "Well, how did you go to that meeting?" I asked, and someone said, "Sure." And so I said, that's the first step.
So I have to laugh because One Joshua Group, we produce a number of national and international programs to bring together experts like Dr. Kimbro. And this one meeting that we produced for the last 19 years, Dr. Kimbro was always there with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 students, and he wasn't there one year. And we actually called to find out why he wasn't coming. But I think he was transitioning from one institution to another. So he doesn't just talk the talk about being a mentor. He walks the walk and brings the students, and he stands with the students at their posters. And while they're presenting, you have to see this, while they're presenting, he's coaching them while the judges are standing there while they're presenting their posters. So it's important to people. So now in closing, Dr. Kimbro, if there were words of wisdom, if there's a takeaway about what you are doing in your work, could you share that with our viewing and listening audience? What would you would want people to remember from this brief discussion about the broad work that you do?
I think one of the philosophies that I would say is I believe in being impactful versus important. I think once you decide that you want to have an impact somewhere, then getting there is a different path than if you want to be important. And if you take advantage of the opportunities that are out there, and they're not as many as they used to be. It used to be a whole lot when I was coming up. And learn to ask and look for those. Now you got the internet. I would say participate in the community engagement events. When you hear about research or being able to participate in research, I would say look it up and see if you qualify. See if it's something you might want to consider. If you ever need an opportunity to check into a career path, ask. Just ask somebody. You'd be surprised how many people would be willing to explain to you how they got to that path.
We've been joined today by Dr. Sean Kimbro of Morehouse School of Medicine. It's always a delight to be amongst those people who elevate our thought, who create an impactful opportunity for us to explore our heart and to look and understand that being intellectual, being academic also means you have an opportunity to include your heart, include your art, include your science, and those things that make the world wonderful. I'm Kermit Payne, your host for LifeBeat, a podcast. We thank you again for joining us. Remember, be kind to yourself and be kind to each other.
We would love to hear from you. Send your listener letters, questions, and topic requests to media@theonejg.com. LifeBeat, the podcast, is sponsored by One Joshua Group, your strategic source for engagement to improve life through better health, education, and information. To learn more, visit us at the1jg.com or follow our work on social media using hashtag 1JGCollabs. One Joshua Group, advancing access to healthcare and education by joining what you know with what we've learned.